All right, looks like it's 6:30. We'll call this August 10th Planning Commission work session to order. We do have some absences, it looks like, but let's get pre-vote roll call.
Mr. Kellum.
Here.
Ms. Heights absent. Mr. Williams.
Yeah.
Vice Chair Sluter.
Here.
Mr. Chairman Greenwood's absent.
All right. Next on the list here is review and adoption of the meeting agenda. Everybody had a chance to review the agenda. Any discussion, motions?
Motion to accept the agenda.
I'll second.
Hey, but three of us.
Motion made, properly seconded. Can we get a roll call?
Mr. Williams.
Aye.
Mr. Kellum.
Aye.
Vice Chair Sluter.
Aye. Item number 3, item number 4, work session matters. Ms. Graham, do you want to take the lead here?
So a couple of things that we have. I did enclose all the notes from our minutes for this year for our previous work sessions, just to kind of give us some reference from some of the changes that we've been making. Proposed changes, we have 86-110 minimum site area and dimensions for primary zoning districts, 86-136.2 boundaries, 86-136.5 changes to the building exteriors and the DPO, 86-140 for the use matrix, Article 2, the zoning definition, 86-189 for daycare centers, 86, we're missing that number, but the short-term business rentals, 86-294 for the buffers, 86-382 the zoning districts, 86-454 minor subdivisions, and then review the ordinance for CUP rezoning and preliminary site plan requirements, and then a few fee changes.
And just for our sake, what we're doing tonight, the goal is to finalize language for what we want to
So we
present
can,
to the board of supervisors.
we need to go ahead and get this to them so they can start doing the review prior to our work session on the 21st. So under our proposed subdivision and zoning ordinance, 86-110. Just to clarify, the minimum lot area for family subdivision shall be 3 acres. We just added the parent parcel should be no less than 5 acres. Just the, that's page 16.
We had a question. We can set this lot size, but can't they go through the courts and overrule us? Because I remember having some in the past where people were trying to do a family divide and they went to the court and the court ruled to let them make things smaller than what we had agreed on.
And
Because
that is correct. If the court orders that the property be divided a certain way among family, or we've even had it happen with a commercial property, we've had to honor what the court ordered.
So if we talk about the family subdivisions, is that addressing all the zoning districts or just the AC?
Just the AC.
So are family subdivisions not allowed in the other zoning districts?
It doesn't specify it in the others. If that's something else we want to clarify, we may want to look into that.
So as our comprehensive plan expands, we may encompass some large tracts of land that would fall within that comp plan. So I think we're going to have to have some language in there. And then you get into the question, if it's in the comp plan and it's RR, that's a 3-acre minimum. Would the parent tract then have to be 3 acres? Or, I mean, just, again, just questions that we're gonna run into that we need to have good answers to, because we have enlarged in their comp plan.
So do we want to put that in for phase 2 for RR and R1?
So the phase we're getting into now is you have to own it 5 years, the family member has to keep it 3, and the parent tract has to stay 5, and the piece cut off for the family member has to be 3. And then in phase 2, another question that's come up is how often can somebody do a family division? We will address that in phase 2.
I did research the Code of Virginia, the way the Code of Virginia reads. It can only be done one time. I have reached out to our county attorney. I've not heard back from him yet. So I'm hoping to have an answer before our 21st work session.
So you're saying if a family is divided a property, the person that ended up with a parcel of that property cannot come back and redivide that property small.
And I'm just gonna use this as an example that say, you cut off a 3-acre parcel for your daughter. And she's held it for 3 years or 5 years. But then she's decided that she wants to get another 3-acre parcel under a family division. The way it's reading, you would not be able to give her another 3-acre parcel under the family division because you've already given her one.
Well, if you have 6 children,
Oh.
and you're saying the same member cannot go back twice, you're saying.
For all 6, any immediate family member could get a
Okay.
3-acre.
It ain't amount of parcels, it's the amount of per
But-
member.
Each family member can only get a family divided parcel one time. So
Out of that division. I looked at a little case law in some other counties and what they ran into, and the reason it says what I just said. There were cases out there, we had 2 sets of grandparents and both wanted to cut a lot off to give to the same grandkid. And they were allowed to do that because it was off of separate parcels. But that individual parcel that grandparents A own can only be family divided to kid A once. But the other grandparents could also cut a 3-acre lot off and give it to kid A. Which I think is probably the way it should be.
But
But that one piece of land if I wanted to cut 3 acres off and give it to my daughter, I can't one time.
Mhm.
I can't go back years now and say, okay, I have 100 acres here. I'm gonna cut another 3 acres off of this and give her another 3-acre lot.
In that case, would they be able to just do a property line adjustment instead?
It's provided that the lots would meet the criteria. You can always do a boundary line adjustment, but that doesn't create a new lot, so that's not gonna help just to do a boundary line adjustment.
Yeah, if I gave my daughter a 3-acre lot off of a 100-acre tract and I wanted to go back and do a boundary line adjustment and make her 3-acre 5 or 7 or 8, you can do that, but it's still just one lot. She can only build one house on that parcel.
So in this case, what we're talking about is giving another parcel that would maybe abut the other one, but would remain a separate parcel.
So I'm waiting to get some clarification from our county attorney. So we should have that before the 21st.
So what ban will this have if you took a property and you split it up among your children? And then it's sold off? Does that deal for your subdivisions? Because you've always split it and you've got it in 3 different parcels. How many more times can that parcel be split?
Well, if you've sold it. So you've got this parcel in your,
You got one parcel left you go sell. Now, do they get to come split that parcel?
it's new ownership, but they would have their own family members. They could still do a family division. But they'd have to meet the criteria, own it for 5 years before they could sell it to an immediate family member.
Well, that's the bottom line. There's a lot of ways out here to circumvent the family subdivision ordinance. But that's why King William put the 8 years in place. Because prior to that, there was no hold period and there were people doing multiple family divisions in the county, really abusing it. But since the 8 years went into effect, which some counties, most counties have less than 8 years. We went to 8 years. Some have 15,
15,
which is the
yeah.
max.
Like up to 2
But
years.
when they put the 8 in effect, that really stopped people from abusing the family division, and you get very few family divisions.
We get some.
Right, but I mean, you don't get dozens a year, you get a handful a year, so it's the best mechanism we have in place with the 8 years to try to deter circumventing the ordinance. But back to what you said, if I gave my kid a 10-acre lot, after she owned it 8 years, she could then family divide that again. I mean, we don't run into that a lot.
Well, I have seen some of that. That's what I was questioning. How many times can you split a family divide?
And unless we just say no family divisions, which I get, I believe is illegal.
The judge won't,
won't
the
allow
judge will
that.
still allow
We put as much in place to try to deter it as we could.
But it's, immediate family and we have changed the ordinance to also allow niece or nephew because there are people out there that don't have children and they're very close to their niece and nephew. So that falls under immediate family member now as well.
Again, that was a phase 2 question.
Yep,
I'm sorry.
already written it down.
Sorry, we dove so deep into it, but
So the next thing is on page 17, 86-113, yards and open space. We just changed it to add terraces, steps, chimneys, open, unenclosed porches, platforms, or paved terraces not covered by roof or canopy and which do not extend above the level of the first floor of the building may extend or project into a required front, side, or rear yard setback not more than 6 feet, provided that no such projection may be closer than 30 feet to the front property line and 10 foot to any side or rear property line. And then D, mechanical equipment may project into the required side or rear yard, provided that they are located no closer than 3 feet to any side or rear property line.
Any discussion?
We good with that? Okay. The next one is 86-136.2 boundaries. That's on page 18. This is one that we've had a little discussion about. So, we've got option 1. The center line shall be measured from the solid yellow line dividing the 2-lane roads and marking the left edge of the divided highway. We have option 2, where an official line has been established for the future widening or opening of a street or major thoroughfare upon which a lot abuts, then the depth of a front or side yard shall be measured from such official line to the nearest line of the building, unless otherwise provided. The right of way of any major thoroughfare so designated on the major thoroughfare plan shall be assumed to extend 40 feet on each side of the center line of the existing right of way for the purpose of measuring front yards required by this ordinance. And option 3, the center line of the highway, meaning a line equidistant from the edges of the median separating the main traveled ways of a divided highway, or the center line of the main traveled way of a non-divided highway.
The option 2 was something kind of new.
That was something we kind of talked about last time, and I did a little research and that's what I came up with.
Where did you pull that one from?
I looked at some other localities and This is something that Mr. Callum was kind of talking about. Um, as far as where the measurements are coming from. Because sometimes there's anywhere from 5 to 10 feet that's dedicated to VDOT. That this way you can,
Variable width.
yeah.
And that seems to be the conundrum we're facing with this language, is trying to account for the varying with the right of ways.
Yeah. The main thing with this is in the TCO. Where it's the 500 from the center of the 30 and 750 foot from the center of 360.
Well, where we kept getting into the weeds on this last time is this measurement should apply to two different things: the setback for the building from 360 and where people have to start adhering to the TCO, which is 750 feet. So as Mr. Williams pointed out, 750 feet measured from the center of the 4 lanes versus the edge of the road is a considerable difference.
Yeah,
So-
because it's like 75 foot difference.
Right. So I that's where we left it. So
Yeah. So I came up with 3 options. If you don't like them, I would say scrap it and we'll go back to it at another time. Or if you like one of these, we'll present it to the board.
Option 2 definitely seems much more specific. And encompassing. I'm concerned with how confusing it might be.
So the official line for future widening, that would be the edge of the VDOT right of way, which would get you back to the variable widths. So most of your secondary roads, again, go from 35 to 50 feet,
Yeah, it changes
all
on
over the
road
place.
any time.
Right.
Right.
So that's why just on the secondary roads, we thought the center line of the road would keep it consistent through the county. That's what their discussion was. That was not my opinion. That was just their discussion. When you got to Route 30, you ran into 1 or 2 places in the county where that could cause some issue. Front of Tractor Supply in the high school, where we go to turning lanes and DXL lanes and all of that stuff. To me, if we kept the center line of Route 30, that still keeps us consistent throughout the county, regardless of the different variable width right of ways. And we could put language in there if we get a situation where we can't really determine where the center line is, like in front of the Tractor Supply, we leave it to staff. We're not going to run into that, but a handful of times in the near future.
Yeah, what I foresee happening is as the central garage area gets developed and significant changes to that intersection or the roads that feed into that intersection change, that's where we're gonna have to, I guess, see.
We're gonna take it on a case by case basis at that point. And then the third is the Route 360. We've talked from de-acceleration lanes to the center of the 4 lanes, I think. And Mr. Williams, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we were kind of leaning, especially him and I last time, to the edge,
The outer edge of
the outer edge of that side of the road is consistent. So if you measured your TCO from the edge of that side of the road that you were working on, the TCO 750 feet from that edge back is going to be consistent all the way down the highway.
Should we adjust any of those setbacks to account for that, or?
But they're losing, well, if we are encompassing more footage that we will have to deal with. Because we're not going to the sun. You know, back on the each person block. Which is only a few places that would even be put.
I mean, like we said, we could go to the center of the 4 lanes, the dead center of that. But then we did talk about where you get to de-acceleration lanes where there are a lot up and down 360, that center does shift over a little bit. But draw imaginary line across the median, across the de-acceleration lane, the center is still the center.
Yeah, because the ditch just gets closer to the center lane.
Right.
But they were talking about measuring from that inside yellow line, that moves,
That changes.
but the ditch still runs down the center. That lane gets closer to the ditch and further from it, depending on where. That, you know, where they have the little cement ditch through the middle, it's real easy to back stuff. It's just trying to come up with something that'll be consistent through the whole thing.
And
The-
we
the-
don't want staff going out there. We certainly don't want individuals trying to go out and measure. So I want to have something that's easily understood by anybody. Because 360 is not when you want to be crossing back and forth trying to measure from, or 30 at that, as far as that goes.
Have you looked at other counties to see
Most of them really don't have anything.
they can't decide just like we can?
Other counties with PCOs,
They really
What-
don't, I mean, they'll say the road is, you know, they have a, and they don't really call it a TCO, but, you know, anything that fronts that road is in their thoroughfare, that type of thing. I did get some of the wording from option 2 from one of the localities. I want to say it was Henrico, but I'm not positive, so don't hold me to it. I did look at a lot to try to find some wording.
I like using the outer edge. It's easier to find.
On
It
three,
is.
on 360? That would be my lesser of all the evils we've talked about, and none of them are perfect.
Yeah.
None of them are perfect, and we're gonna run into isolated situations, but that outside edge of pavement keeps it consistent through the county on 360. And I still go back to center line on secondary and 30. And just have some language in there that if there's some discrepancy, staff has final say so. You're gonna run into that from the dump to Venner Road right now
Yeah.
in the next 10 years.
and the only catch for 360, if you would do and adjust to that outside edge metric, is if we shrunk the TCO, you know, part of the distance of the right of way, then it would stick, they would still be working with the same line they had been on their property. They just don't have to measure across the highway to get it. So because 360 is 150-foot wide right of way.
So
So
instead of
from the center,
750,
that's 75 foot.
so instead of 750,
So instead of
675 or something like that.
or even, you know,
Or even 700.
even 700 wouldn't be all that bad. But you feel like,
700 is a long distance.
yeah,
What you're gonna run into with the 700, and again, we talked about it, but it's gotta be talked about again. Sharon Road, Venner Road, your roads that are in close proximity. That's gonna be
But we
third,
did
third
make the determination that that only affected the properties that
running.
front that corridor, correct?
Now, this section of the ordinance that we're working on is only in the TCO area. It doesn't really address measurements from secondary roads.
Right, but wherever we decide to measure for setbacks for commercial buildings or houses or whatever, it needs to be the same measuring for the TCO as well, just to keep it consistent. 30 is gonna be the center line for the TCO and the setbacks. And the secondary roads do not have to deal with the TCO. Well, I say that, Sharon and Venner could potentially have to deal with the TCO, just the ends 700 feet off of 360,
Yeah, the backside.
which is all of Sharon Road for the most part.
So do we want to go with the outer edge? And then if in question, leave it up to,
I think we've
Planning?
got to have a Article 100 in there, like the building department, that staff has final say so. And to handle the isolated cases, but I'm in favor of the outer edge of 360 and the center line of the other two roads. That's the lesser of the evils.
Yeah, I think we do that, but I think we shrink that setback for that TCO. In the process.
so right now for 360, it's 750 feet.
We could go with 700, is, we all go with that?
And you know, while you're writing that down, I just asked the question, have we ever to this point, and I know it's coming, but we really haven't had any 700 feet issues with the TCO. People either built well within it or nobody's really been right on the edge of it where it has come up. So it will eventually.
People not build because of it.
Well, you know, the TCO is supposed to be our commercial corridor, and if you're a business, you want to be as close to 360 as you could be, so.
So for today's purposes, keep it what we just said and
Left
The-
edge
the-
of 360.
the adjusting the we'll leave the TCO at 700, shrinking that even further, which I would be in favor of, will be another discussion.
Do you not want me to include it on our 21st work session? The
If-
reduction?
Throw it on there. But,
Two of them should go together.
I think they should, yeah,
Well,
I mean, we're talking-
yeah,
We are discussing the,
yeah. Since it directly impacts it, I think we need to go ahead and address it.
all right, so we're good with that. All right.
We're just verifying where it is instead of changing we're doing anybody else.
All right, and then on page 19, 86-136C. The regulations in the TCO district shall apply to all commercial sites developed, redeveloped, or expanded after the establishment of the district. The district shall not apply to residential sites or those sites developed prior to its establishment. So we added commercial and we added shall not apply to residential sites. We were talking about, the TCO requirements, and not really, and we could even say single residential sites to, not include or have it be where you have a big development in it, not be included, but your single lots are your single residential sites, I guess. We can add that in there.
The one thing I'd like to put out there, just for a little clarification, and just so everybody understands. Any existing building in the TCO can be added on to 1,200 square feet without having to adhere to the TCO
One time.
one time. So if you have a building along 360, and I'll give you a good example, the Playmore Pool Building, which has been the one we've had to deal with most recently. If that building were, if he wanted to add 1,200 square feet to that building and put vinyl siding on that 1,200 square foot addition, he could. He does not have to adhere to the TCO requirements that say you cannot put vinyl siding on that. And that's the way the ordinance reads now. So any new buildings of any size have to adhere to the TCO. But it gives the existing folks we have along 360 that have vinyl or other products, if they want to add to that building, to keep the same material. Which is what the county did with the Parks and Rec building and the police department down there. They expanded. I actually didn't expand the footprint, but you put vinyl siding back on it because
Just like
that's what was.
necessary
on it.
repairs to it. Yeah, updated it just a little bit.
Do we have any commercial buildings that also have like an apartment or some kind of residential capacity? Like I'm thinking of like a upstairs apartment or anything along those lines.
I'm not.
I'm sorry, we need to interrupt. Mr. Franklin is down all right.
Okay.
Mr. May have to go back and have to authorize it.
There
Okay.
it is.
So what do we have to do protocol for that?
Go back and amend the agenda to allow electronic participation.
Okay, so we will need a motion then.
So moved.
Second.
So that requires a roll call vote.
Aye.
Mr. Williams, Vice Chair Sluter,
All right, welcome, Mr. Greenwood. Can you hear us?
Yeah, sorry, we had a big thunderstorm here and knocked out everything. Can y'all hear me?
Yes, we are on page 19 of our booklet.
Okay, thanks.
So are we good to,
Yeah, I was just curious, do we have any commercial properties that also?
I'm not
have-
aware of any, but it is allowed in the ordinance. So they could have like a caretaker apartment or something.
I was
like
just
that.
curious how that would. If it was located in the TCO, does that building, is that considered residential and exempt?
Well,
from
the
it?
residential probably would be accessory to it if it's a commercial establishment there.
But it would still be a residential building, so it says residential is exempt from the TCO, so if you have a brick commercial building and they want to build a vinyl superintendent's house,
So do we want to say commercially zoned sites or?
I'm more concerned with somebody building a residential dwelling, turning it into a business and still living there. And that's a way to skirt the TCO.
Well, and we do have houses, not very many, and Barbara had done the list for us. That are non-conforming businesses that probably were residential at one time. I mean, they appear to be
Yeah,
house type structures, so.
I don't know that
So
we
what-
necessarily, it's one of those where are we trying to answer a question to a problem that we haven't had? But I don't know how much.
Well, it's just to make it clear that the residential parcels can continue as residential and don't have to meet the commercial requirements that the commercial lots do, such as the landscaping and the shielding of different things. But if they were to come back later and convert it into a commercial, then they would have to meet the parking and other commercial requirements.
but they would not have to pull the vinyl siding off the house and put stucco or brick or anything like that on.
Which is the
Again.
next thing we're going to be addressing that we've been talking about.
Yep. All right.
All right, so then the next one, same section, number 6. And, we've gone back and forth with A. So we changed added the stucco, the trivet, the gabalone, brick, stone, decorative block, split face block, neutral color, cementous block, cemented siding, or other materials with similar texture and appearance are considered appropriate to the county character and shall be provided on the main building facade. Nationally recognized and or trademarked colors, logos, and pictures or similar type features may be permitted on the building facades, awnings, or other complementary architectural features with the approval of the director of planning. Vinyl siding, flat or corrugated metal and concrete blocks should not be used for exterior siding materials on any building except that vinyl siding may be used as trim material. The exterior covering material shall extend to the ground, except that when a solid brick or masonry perimeter foundation is used, exterior covering material need not extend below the top of the foundation. And then we had not less than 16% of the total area of any facade visible from the public right of way, excluding work areas, shall consist of windows and doors. And then we have the mechanical equipment, including ductwork, air compressors, and other fixed operating machinery shall be either screened from view with either a solid wall, solid fence, or landscaping, or located so that such items are not visible from the public right of way. Utility meters, above ground tanks, satellite dishes, antennas, etc., shall be similar treated. Roof mounted mechanical equipment shall be opaquely screened from view at grade by parapet walls or other similar structures that reflect the architecture of the building.
know, that was one that we went back and forth on for a while. I'm okay with the language. Since I do have a question where it says, at the very beginning, building exteriors visible from US Highway 360 or State Highway 30. Could that include properties that are not in the TCO?
This is all, TCO criteria, this area, this section of the ordinance.
Okay.
That's where you get into what we discussed last time. If you take a big farm field, and somebody wanted to build a building 751 feet out in the field, they would not have to adhere to the TCO. Again, you're creating a problem where there's not a problem, but that is a way somebody could try to circumvent if they so desired
And we
If they
do,
wanna waste that much land in front of it,
and building a road.
and we do have the option that's listed on that first paragraph. That it has to meet the criteria that I just read, or be reviewed and approved by the planning commission. So as Claymore, that went in before the ordinance did. We brought their elevation views of the building to the planning commission and they approved it. So
so Claymore is building a building that we're having trouble being approved.
no, the building itself, their elevation views of the building came and got approved. I want to say maybe a year ago. It's been a while. We didn't have to hold a public hearing, but we just brought their elevation views for the planning commission to look at and say it was okay.
It was non-conforming, I guess, to the TCO in some way. I forget.
It was
exactly.
metal,
Yeah.
yeah. But
We
they,
didn't have the metal in this description here. That's right.
are we good with this?
Like I said, I think we went through this pretty thorough, so I'm good with it.
I've got a question though, just from the building trade. You've got decorative block. And then you have no concrete block. I thought most of those decorative blocks were actually poured out concrete.
I think their intent was just not a plain 8-inch plain block. They do have split.
What most people call a cinder block.
Right, cinder block. We don't want cinder blocks, but we're okay with the split face blocks that look like they have the rough stone texture to them. Which is typically what you see a lot in your commercial buildings.
You good with it?
It's still a concrete block.
But it's decorative. Okay, same section, number 12. And 13, and I guess 14, which that number was wrong. Fencing along the public right of way is discouraged, but if used, such fencing, shall be landscaped to minimize visibility for the public right of way or be of a style which is harmonious with the rural, agricultural, and historical character of the county. Chain link fence shall be prohibited. Now, this is just in the right of way area.
I thought we had a pretty lengthy discussion about the sidewalks. That had been taken out and then it put back in. Now I see it's back in here. The
That is
discussion-
up to y'all. I know we've talked about it back and forth.
Well, I think that some of the cases in point were the dollar store and the hardware store, basically sidewalks to nowhere. But again, some of the argument was as the area develops, you'll connect the sidewalk. So I mean, I just know it was in, it was out, it was in, it was out. I don't know if we ever came up with a final.
I thought we took it out, but then we left it so that there was a certain amount of right of way or open space that was still allowed in case we wanted to bring it back. I remember something about maybe a 10-foot right of way or something that was going to be allowed in case we brought it back, but we did actually take the sidewalks out. Like I said, that's deterring a lot of people from coming.
We have that 10 foot in the TCO. buffer
Right.
area.
Yeah,
So do we want to take it out?
I-
Number
Yeah.
13?
Yeah, I
But-
think, yeah, I think we should, at least for now. I'm thinking of Dixon's, I mean, the only area that it really would make sense is certain portions of that central garage intersection.
We just
I
don't
think-
want to have to pay to expand that, sidewalk later on.
And we currently do not have the sidewalks in front of the Burger King, the Food Line, the bank, the Bojangles, the car wash.
And they would all be nice to have it. through
It would be
there.
nice to have it
That-
there, to
yeah,
Mr. Sluter's
yeah.
point, but it's not there. But from there,
I'm just wondering how
out,
much.
it doesn't really
if-
make
If
sense.
somebody's trying to build a small business. A Dixon's, for example, small mom and pop business. How much of a cost to their business is that going to discourage them from being able to?
And
Yeah.
in Dixon's, it's gonna be a very long time before we ever get sidewalks down that
Right.
vicinity.
But-
I say that, I can't imagine. Cause it's kind of getting out of the area.
But the big question would be the development you're talking about going from Benner Road back to 30.
Yeah. the
we
signs back.
had that discussion. That one's a PUD. That one has to have.
That one, yeah, that will have, that's
A
required.
planned unit development has to have the sidewalk, so that would take care of that one. Which that one needs a sidewalk. That's a long stretch of road frontage. It's gonna be commercial businesses, but that would be, anything PUD wise would have to have it. That's in the PUD ordinance.
It's because the PUD is supposed to be a walkable community. That's
Right.
criteria.
is Naparlo's property a PUD property or is that not?
With the development, that is, but, where the, Burger King site is, where the Wawa's gonna go,
Right, that wasn't,
that's not part of the PUD. However, I wanna say there were sidewalks in here.
that's what I thought too. I thought they had them in the plans, and that's another thing I wanted to mention. If Naparlo, when they do get around to building that PUD behind the commercial lots up front, we can make exceptions and put that they do put sidewalks in that section, because like you said, in Central Garage, it might be nice to have, to be able to come from that development in front of those commercial lots over to Wawa and into and around that whole Central Garage area, but that we can put in by individual, a special.
Okay, you've got the place that's coming between the gas station and Essex Bank.
The Dunkin' Donuts and the other one,
Yes,
do they show sidewalks?
If we asked Duncan to do it, it would still be a sidewalk to nowhere because the gas station
Right,
doesn't have it and the bank doesn't have it. So when they got to the property line, they would step onto the bank property.
but
No
we,
sidewalk.
but we have that $1 crosswalk there. It'd be nice to have some sidewalk going to it. Yeah, we were kind of, in my opinion, like fools to have a crosswalk that didn't go connect to the development around it.
But the fact is that train's already left the station. But the
Well, that's
development
on
that
the
was
county
already
at this point.
approved,
If we want to add a sidewalk,
it's gonna be
there.
spotty.
it would
I
be,
mean, 'cause
it
we
would be
can't-
the county's expense to install it and
Yes.
maintain it and. so forth,
Exactly.
Correct. And that's the thing, I mean, our TCO is also Route 30, the entire length of the county. I, once again, the Dollar General that's just right up the street here. I just don't see where that's of any benefit. It's just an increased unnecessary cost to business. Unless we provide some kind of exceptions to it, for Route 30 but I would just.
Well, let's take it out. Let me do a little research and see if it's a way to put it in there. A little bit differently, not under this part for TCO, but just, in general, commercial development or multifamily development. That's what it is.
And I would agree with Mr. Greenwood. I think Mr. Napalo, if they are going to be required to have sidewalks in their PUD,
Yeah,
extend it on to the Wawa so that people can walk from one end of the PUD all the way to the Wawa, use the high dollar crosswalk and go to the food line and to the Fast Mart, wherever else they need to go. That's the best we can get right now.
yeah. Unless we come up with like a district, I mean, I know we're talking about some kind of districts for other things. Could we have like a central garage sidewalk district that just would deal with just that particular, maybe a certain number of feet in each direction from that intersection? I mean, it's something to look at later maybe, but is that something we could do to add some sort of a district that could be allowed?
I think we can work something, yeah, let me work on it, but let's go ahead and move it into
Phase
phase
three.
2. Or phase 3.
On the side.
We may be
Or-
dividing that phase
It might
2.
be something where, we put in a sidewalk, put in the sidewalk is highly encouraged, but can be exempted with approval from the planning administrator, or something along those lines too.
Or if sidewalks are in that area,
Correct.
then a
yeah.
sidewalk would have to be added to connect to
Yeah.
the sidewalk.
Let's take it out and move forward, and then we can put that in that phase 2 or phase 3.
So we're scratching number 13, number 12, was that okay, or? for the
The
fencing?
fencing,
And then the number is wrong, number 14, no small scale, medium scale, or utility scale solar facilities shall be permitted in the transportation corridor overlay district.
Remember, we did have somebody that spoke out against that particular change. They didn't cite the reasons why, but is there any discussion with that? Any reasons that we should?
Might have been Mr. Otto. Mr. Otto had something about that, because like you said, the small scale, but he was suggesting that maybe a housetop was small scale, but I think that Sherry explained that it was that's not included because that's,
It is.
what did you, yeah, so I think we cleared that up. Small scale is over a certain amount of that panel size or something.
but residential use is permitted. It's
Right.
your small scale commercial site.
Yeah. I'm okay with it with that.
I feel like if we're trying to preserve the rural integrity of the county, as much as possible, I feel like we probably need to add this in here.
In our commercial, district.
Yeah, I
We
mean,
don't want that in our
yeah.
commercial district.
the old Newcastle solar farm, down that way. You've gotta go back in there in order to see that, but Hanover decided to put
Right
one,
there.
in one of the most beautiful pieces of farmland, in central Virginia, in my opinion, but, I don't see where we need to be doing the same thing, so.
Well, and to just echo what you said, I mean, I think most people would agree. I know I certainly would. The old Newcastle solar farm was done about as tastefully as one could be done. I mean, like, I said, you've got to be looking forward
Yeah.
to catch a little glimpse of it when you
Yeah.
go by. I mean, that's the best you can hope.
And same thing with the ones that at the schools. I mean, you gotta look for them, and I think that we've done a good job as a county of hiding, those that I don't think that. I've never talked to anybody. I'm sure there's maybe some people that think that they're attractive, but I've never talked to anybody that follows along those lines. So
Food for thought for the fourth meeting is we have to decide what percentage of the county. And again, well, I'm not even buddy the word, that'd be another.
Yeah, but we do have that in the background, but I've done a little research on it. But that's for another,
Yeah, I agree.
another phase,
Right.
not phase 1.
Yep, agreed.
I did add in here, and we could leave it, we could take it out. Exceptions to the transportation corridor overlay district requirement. Exceptions to the development requirements and standards specified in this article may be granted by the Board of Supervisors following a recommendation by the Planning Commission in accordance with the procedures set out in this section. So if there's an unusual circumstance, it does leave somebody the option to go to the planning commission or the board for an exception.
Yeah, it's valuable to have in here. There's always new products coming out and I'm just thinking in terms of the exterior finishes to buildings in particular, but we can't think of everything, unfortunately.
There's all, you know, you never know, there could be a special circumstance that comes up, or like I said, different materials. They've got some nice looking stuff out there now.
And where that paragraph is gonna be very useful is again, back to the Sharon roads and the Venner roads. If somebody comes in and wants to build something facing Sharon Road, although it falls within the TCO, you know, they should be able to come to the planning commission and say, hey, I'm gonna be facing Sharon Road, I'm not utilizing 360 at all. There's already some sort of buffer there. Let's look at this and see if we can get to where we can get.
And there's parts of that that are very hard to measure
Yeah.
because it goes straight up.
You also have
verticals.
Mount Pleasant, if that area through there were to ever be developed in any sense. Once again, access from 360 is not going to be, you're not going to want access from 360. So that could generate another, so we.
And you're exactly right. There's 3 or 4 prime pieces of real estate on that.
But it gives them an option.
Yep.
So is everybody good with that?
Yeah.
All right, so the next thing is under daycare centers. Childcare centers for churches. Currently, it says religious assemblies means a use providing a regular organized religious worship and related incidental activities except primary or secondary schools and daycare. I did scratch to that and added primary, secondary schools and daycare facilities shall be permitted with approval of a conditional use permit. So that would allow the churches to have the daycare, preschool, kindergarten, that type of thing. There's a big need for it, and a lot of the churches would normally do this. I only know of one in the county right now that's doing it. And I only know of one other daycare center in the county.
Yeah, one at McHenry and one at Colossi. I know there's one at McHenry. I thought there's one at Colossi. What we, I mean, again, it's.
I used to have one at Sharon. but it doesn't
That's what I
work
was going to ask.
Yeah.
But
So
it's a big
we'd like-
need.
And then the other one is in the Commerce Park.
Mhm.
So,
All right. Next to Andy's.
That, that has nothing to do with school, a church, that's just right.
But it's a use that a lot of churches do consider doing.
I'm good with that.
Is that good for everybody?
Yeah.
And then the next thing is the short-term business rentals, 86-210. And the change would be on page 23, number 4. And we haven't gotten to the use matrix yet. But we are proposing to require a CUP in the AC district. We already have it, a CUP required if it's in RR or R1, but permitted by right in the AC. So we were gonna take that out, and also we require a CUP approval. But we also added an annual renewal application and fee of $75 is required. If the planning department has received any valid complaints within the year, the short-term rental permit may not be renewed, and the applicant must reapply for a conditional use permit. The Commissioner of Revenue will not renew the business license until they receive their annual renewal permit.
Ms. Graham, do you know how many short-term rentals we have in the county at the present?
Well, we've only got one legal one right now.
It's keyword legal.
Is that right? Do we have to add another one come in?
I'm actually been keeping track of them, so we have 4 on the list of ones that I've actually signed off on. So there's 4.
Have we
Have they
had
got
any,
business license?
Yes.
have we had any,
So they must be
legitimate
fairly new.
complaints come in yet? On any of them?
No, sir.
Any,
I know we've gotten some complaints recently, and the ones that I checked on did not have anything on to make the move.
Did we ever find out where the money that had been collected on that Verbo one that we finally approved that's been collected all this time, where the money, because they had been taking it out and they said it was coming to the county, but it never did. Is there any way to get that back?
I don't know that there's any way to get it back, but, we have talked with the Commissioner of Revenue, and that's something we're gonna address later on this year.
Okay.
did we get, any kind of confirmation on a county transient occupancy tax?
That's what we're gonna be working on later on.
And I think what Mr. Greenwood was referring to is the Foley's had paid the tax.
Right.
And they do not know where it went, and it did not come to us, so it's sitting in limbo out there somewhere.
They said it went to King William County, but the King William County never got it. Yeah.
I'm not sure.
So all we can do is move forward.
I think it would be hard to go back.
Yeah.
At this point, try to collect on something.
Yeah, as long as we get it moving forward, that's good. And the transient tax, we work on that coming up, so.
So the language here that we added is, the purpose of this is to provide some protection against adjacent property owners. Also give us some kind of foundation that we can remove problem short-term rentals. Any other discussion on that?
On the short-term rental things. Just a whole different ball to deal with.
Yeah, and we're gonna see more of them, I would assume.
I think we will too.
And like y'all explained, that's basically like your bed and breakfasts.
No, a bed and breakfast would be considered different than
A
that,
little bit
correct?
different.
So it would be a single family home that
It's
is
owner occupied as well.
Unoccupied where your VRBOs or your Airbnbs, they're not. But they're rented by the week or by the weekend or 2-night minimum, that type of thing.
But the CUP being required in the AC. That makes it where anywhere, any zoning, they would have to have a CUP, correct?
We can regulate it, have
Put
certain
additional-
restrictions
Put
on it.
additional, yep.
Yeah, we need to.
That would be the time to do it when they came in asking for the CUP.
When they come in to apply for approval, yeah.
We follow down the same path we did with the Foley's with the ring doorbell and fencing if necessary. They want the river not to be able to bring your own motorboat or use the one that was there. So that's when we would address that during the CUP there. Yeah. Correct.
And would this also be something that would deal with the wedding venues then?
No, that would be more under the Airbnbs. Now, the bed and breakfast, now that did come up, during the public hearing, and that was one thing. They were not allowed to have special events. That was one of the requirements. They were limited to the number of people that they could have. And they were not allowed to have, motor watercraft there. So there was like 13 or 14 requirements, for their approval.
Let them nail down pretty good.
They did. All right, so the next one is the minor subdivision. 86-454, page 25. And this is one we talked about quite a bit, so, D1. We scratched through, there should be only one access to an adjacent primary or secondary highway by a new street, and no lot shall have direct access to an existing primary or secondary highway. And we have changed it to say There shall be only one access to an adjacent primary highway. There shall be only one access to a secondary highway or a shared deeded driveway for every 2 lots that front on a secondary highway. A shared access shall be provided on a 50-foot wide easement extending from the existing public road to cover all lots within the subdivision. There shall be a road maintenance agreement for each lot in the subdivision.
And a minor subdivision is 4 lots now.
Correct.
So now instead of having 1 access per 4 lots, we go ahead 2.
You can have 1 for 4 lots, or you can have a shared driveway for 2 lots. Because sometimes a minor isn't 4 lots, sometimes a minor is 2 or 3 lots. Just depends. But it gives them the option of doing 1 driveway, or they can do a shared driveway for 2 lots.
So what did they do with the third?
Well, I was just using that as.
I know, but you
example.
threw it out there. That's what
Yeah.
I'm saying.
It just depends on, they may just have a 2-lot minor.
I understand the 1 driveway for 2 lots.
Yeah,
And
but it
1
gives them-
driveway for 4 lots.
Well, even if they have 4 lots, they could have 2 driveways. 1 for 2 lots and another one for 2 lots. Or they can have 1 shared road for all 4.
I know we've had a problem of adding more and more driveways on Route 30. And I know PDOT wasn't happy using.
Well, they can only have 1 access on a primary highway. So anything along 30 or 360, they can only have 1 access. The secondary roads are where they can have the shared driveways,
That's only on secondary,
only on secondary.
because we got enough single lots coming out all the way down the back roads to it. The safety of people trying to pull out and drive down the road or in some places.
Well, it does reduce the number of driveways by requiring a shared drive. But like I said, it is only secondary.
If they're putting in a real shared driveway with the wider entrance, they can get in and get out safer than trying to get across 20-foot pipe on a secondary road.
So are we good with this one?
So there'll be no more 1 lot per every lot down secondary road.
And the other thing, that VDOT now requires 30 feet of pipe. So that, which 20 feet was to now, I'm agreeing with you wholeheartedly, so VDOT did go to 30 feet.
And I
Even,
know-
even on a single lot, one house now has to have a 30-foot.
So previously, we had it as you could have 1 for each lot.
You could have 4
We
driveways for
cut
4
that in
lots.
half and added some options to.
Well, when the ordinance changed, it changed it completely. Where before it wasn't, they weren't allowed on the primary roads, but 25-acre exempts were. Then they took the 25-acre exempts out, but we put that back in. And they did allow them on the primary roads, but you don't want too many driveways on a primary road, so we left it as 1 entrance. But then on the secondary, we did want to reduce the number, so that's why we came up with the shared driveways.
The problem I see with that is the 25-acre exempts. When they make these real long, narrow exempts, it looks like small lots, but they're 25 acres.
They took that out of there too. It used to be you could have a 50-foot stem, 500 feet. They took that out. You can't do that now.
Flag lots aren't permitted anymore.
So I'm not talking about a flag lot. I'm talking about you take a long, narrow piece of property and cut all these long slices, make 25 acres. So
The bowling,
You would
alley.
still have to have your road
You
front.
gotta have 300 feet of road frontage, even on an exempt lot, if you do that. Now, you can no longer have the 50 feet like you're talking about, where it's driveway, driveway, driveway. It has to have 300 foot of road frontage, just like in 5-acre lots.
So that's still 1 driveway every 300 feet.
on your exempt lots.
It'd be every 600 feet for the non-exempt.
No.
On the non-exempt, yeah.
Your 5 acre lots would be 300 feet. And it would be 600 feet. Instead of every 300, they'd be every 600 now, but on your 25 acre exempts, they could potentially still be every 300 feet.
But I have not seen multiple 25 since I've been here, not along 30 or 36 feet. I've had two. And they were actually more than 25 acres. For each parcel.
Well, I know the property across from my house, they cut it up in 25, 30 acre lots, but they haven't put all the driveways in yet. Or they haven't got all of them occupied. If you go from Dabney's Mill Road back to what's it, about a mile and a half, that's all cut up in a long, narrow stretch.
And you would no longer be able to do that the way it's changed. So I mean, that obviously predated the subdivision ordinance. There's nothing you can do about that now, but that would no longer be allowed on Route 30. They took that out.
Unless those lots are still 300 feet. Minimum road buffer.
Where he's talking about, it was 50-foot stems, 50-foot stems. So you could potentially have a driveway every 50, 75 feet. That was taken out of there to where it would at least have to be every 300 feet now. So it did improve it, maybe not
So they
enough, but it
couldn't,
did improve it.
what he's saying, they couldn't do that now.
No.
So are we-
I'm sure it'll get more discussion.
Yeah.
This is why we've just discussed at about every meeting just about, so this is
The more
what
people,
came out of the meeting.
when we have more people at the meeting, there'll be more discussion again.
If we want to leave it for work session,
Let's leave it there.
Yep.
Work on it in the work section.
Where are we jumping to now?
it's under definitions.
Page number be nice.
I didn't see any red ink and definitions.
Under Townhouse, yep, page 55.
Just there.
147.
So I ain't got that on yet.
There's 147.
Oh, there's one on 47. Okay. Yep, she's right. The same thing under religious assembly. We added primary, secondary schools and daycare facilities shall be permitted with approval of a CUP. And then the townhouses, we just added, this includes carriage homes and condominium structures that are single-family homes that share walls with neighboring units. We really didn't have anything in our definitions that covered the carriage homes and the condominium structures. Good. Everybody good with definition?
Yeah,
Good. And I think the only change was the short term. I don't know that we had anything else in here. And that's on page 60, but it did not come out in red. So
Now,
short-term rental businesses.
Yeah, that, changing that to requirement condition.
are we not gonna jump into phase two tonight? Is that gonna be another meeting? All right, the only thing I would say, I looked ahead a little bit to phase two. And we are going to talk about at that point rezoning parcels along 360.
Yes.
So when we talk about rezoning parcels along 360, we're also going to talk about the conceptual plan and what needs to be on it. And part of our discussion, and just getting food for thought for the next meeting, we discussed if we rezone properties along 360 and we say they do not have to have a full-blown site plan, but a glorified conceptual plan. We were also gonna try to go back in the use matrix and put things in there that we did not want. But we were also going to consult with the county attorney to find out what we could legally say we did not want.
Especially like in the industrial zones where we've got it broken down, but we don't have it broken down in the matrix.
Right. So in phase two, we're gonna have to revert back to the matrix and alter that just a little bit. If we have a section in there that we said, we definitely do not want this type of business here in the county. Which, again, I will reiterate, I think we have to be very careful about that.
Part of that rezoning was, we were going to wait until we had an EDA director in place. Do we have an update on that position?
We don't at this time, but it's certainly something we can start.
Stash back.
He's EDA. EDA director.
right now.
You're hired. You have a interview next week. Okay.
But it's still something we can go ahead and get started on. We've already done the homework on the lots that are currently zoned business, the ones that are zoned residential. Barbara did it with all the information, with acreage, that type of thing. And what the current use is on each building.
Kind of tying the EDA to the Sharon Road, to the new business. I don't know if everybody here is aware of it, but the Fleetwood junkyard is being revamped. I don't know if y'all paid a whole lot of attention to that, but they're doing a wonderful job
They
cleaning
are.
it up, fixing it up.
I drove by there, I don't know, it's been a few weeks ago, and I was thinking to myself, how old is it?
It's old. It's now Edwards Auto Parts, but if you go by there, he is doing daily a lot of work cleaning that place up and improving it, definitely for the better.
And getting stuff out of the back that we didn't know was back there.
So that predates all of us.
Yes.
Yeah, they were kids. Yeah, that's one thing that the EDA people, of all the multiple people we did interview, the ones that were real good candidates that we were going to allow, they were going to do the same thing. And like Mr. Kellum said, go through and have sites that were already available for development. So we should maybe continue, because like I said, it looks like it's going to be a long road. I mean, I don't know how the interviews next week are going to go, but it's only one. But anyway, if we start getting some of it done ourselves, it'll be done for them when they get there. So that would help. And then we would have something right now, because I said right now we don't have anything.
That's something we can start looking into. And we were going to notify, we had said we would notify the property owners and give them a chance to weigh in before we did anything.
Mhm.
What else do you have for us, Ms. Graham?
Okay, so the short term was good with the CUP?
Yeah.
Okay. So then we get into the review of the ordinances for conditional use permits, rezoning and preliminary site plan requirements, as well as concept plans.
What page are we on?
That's just the notes on 64. And we've got phase two, and we don't have to do this tonight, but, maybe when we have everybody at our next meeting, we can decide which topics we want to address next under phase 2. And, just briefly, I just kind of want to go over some fee changes. There's not too many, that I was gonna bring, before the board, at the work session as well. So we have, on page 68, we have conditional use permit, commercial. It was, 3,500 plus $50 an acre. And we just kept it at 3,500. It took the $50 an acre. Page 69 is where we have some of the new. So what they were previous was like $500 and 25 per acre. So and I did do some research around some of the surrounding localities, and that was pretty high for our single lots and our minors. So we put those at $300 each. We didn't have anything for the exempt subdivision, and we didn't have anything for the farmstead subdivision. So we added a category for each of those at $300 as well. And then we didn't have anything for a PUD preliminary or PUD final, a cluster division preliminary or cluster division final. So the PUD preliminary and final, we did 2,500. The cluster division preliminary, we did 25. The cluster division final, we did 500. One of the reasons for some of the changes, when we have a family division or exempt division, when we do a review on them, it's not nearly the time and staff involved as it is if we have a major subdivision or a PUD. There's it's multiple reviews. It's 4 or 5 reviews and submittals before we ever get to a final approval. We don't normally have that with your farmsteads, your exempts, your family division. So that's why we had dropped that to the 300. And we're more in line with our adjacent localities.
Any discussion? Thoughts? Mr. Williams? Stephen, you have anything?
No, it's okay.
There.
Okay, so the next thing is conceptual site plans. For and the submission requirement checklist for conditional use applications and for rezoning applications. We kind of went through this with our last public hearing where we did the preliminary site plan review, which had everything on it that we had to go through, and we did the checklist. But with that, a lot of that is stuff that is kind of out of our hands. I mean, it have to go to VDOT for review and approval. And it could go to VDOT 2 or 3 times before they're finished with it. It has to go to HRSD for utility review and approval. It has to go to utilities or for the county for review and approval. It goes to ENS for review. It goes to DEQ for review, and each division is going to have multiple changes. And those are still requirements that are on the preliminary. So even though it goes to y'all and you review it, it's going to be out of our hands if the other divisions make changes. So I was thinking more of a concept plan with a lot of the information that you want, but with some information maybe excluded. Since some of that is out of our hands.
I felt like the checklist from the last meeting, I thought that was very helpful to me to be able to go and see that everything was addressed in some form, or at least if it didn't say what it was right there, it told you where to look for it. And that was helpful for me. I'm sure that's helpful for the applicant to make sure that they're covering all their bases as well.
And that is taken directly out of the current ordinance. And when I did that, I wanted to make sure that you all knew which sheet it was located on. But with that, and of course, y'all recommended approval. But when they get to that point and it goes to the other divisions, it's possible there's gonna be changes.
When there's significant changes made, is there ever a point where we would be able to weigh in on those other changes? Or once we approve it, it's that's the last?
So
the
you don't
last-
want the applicants to be coming back for every little thing, but if they were making changes to the site itself, like boundary changes or building changes, that type of thing, or even location of amenities or roads, that might be something that you want to
For
look at.
example, the last one, you have that small area of wetlands that they're gonna have to navigate that road, that stump road through there. If that's not signed off when they have to do something completely different, would that be bounced back to us at that point? Or
Currently, it would.
So these 34 items that you have listed here, that's what we're gonna require on a conceptual plan?
Well, that would be up to y'all. That's a
Because
a
that's
list.
stuff,
It's
this is
still
still
a
a
lot.
site plan.
Yeah, there's still a lot, so I kind of wanted us to go through and make sure either you do, or these are things you do or do not want to look at.
Yeah, I mean, these 34 items, I don't know what else you could possibly put on a plat. This is a full-blown site plan.
Well, it shows. It doesn't show grade, elevation, actual site disturbance or building street. But it does show where it's all going.
And things like the traffic impact analysis, I mean, that's something you wouldn't do on a conceptual plan, I would think.
Well,
Well,
that probably needs to be done even before conceptual plans, doesn't it?
we have been requiring it, just so that we know, it doesn't necessarily have to be thoroughly approved by VDOT, but to know that VDOT's going to allow that entrance there. So they do require a traffic impact analysis, even do researches.
So if we decide to go through the county and rezone a handful of properties to a commercial use so that we have something available if someone comes along, those properties will not have to follow this checklist.
They won't, but they would still have to follow the commercial site plan regs, which it would be up to VDOT, but if it's more than a low volume, then they're gonna have to do a traffic impact analysis. Or VDOT, they're gonna put the entrance in, maybe a turn lane. So they're still gonna have to do the same requirements. We're not gonna sign off on anything until we get VDOT approval or ENS and utility approval.
So the bigger discussion here was if someone had a piece of property and they wanted to rezone it to B2, not to develop it, just to rezone it and make it a marketable piece of property. If you tell that said person that they've got to get a traffic impact analysis, that's going to be a deal breaker.
They're not gonna wanna do it.
They're not going
because-
to do it. I mean, because the
Yeah.
cost of fulfilling this checklist for a potential client. Now, once someone buys the piece of property and says, hey, we want to put a Wawa here, then absolutely they have to do it. But no one, it's just not feasible to spend all this money to get a piece of property rezoned. And which again, I'm not making an argument one way or the other. I'm just saying if the idea is to rezone some properties so that when someone comes looking, we have something to show them, which we currently don't. then this right here is just a deal breaker.
So for the rezoning, what would you think we should require? Just the rezoning portion, not CUP, but just the rezoning.
Well, little bit of a loaded question, so I'll go back a little bit. A lot of what Mr. Wagner talked about is we want to have some control over what could, once you rezone it, you lose some control. It's a cart horse thing here. That's where you go back in your use matrix and put in there, which you definitely do not want on any parcel in the county. But if you, again, I think most of us would agree, if you just take a landowner who says, hey, I've got a piece of land on 360, this would be a great place for a business, I'd like to rezone it and see if a big box store comes along and wants to buy it. I mean, they'd have to spend $50,000 to fulfill this checklist.
Well, he's not gonna know what the final purpose of that land is gonna be.
No
So
building,
how
no
can-
square
how
footage,
can
no
you come up
land.
with,
Right.
And with the rezoning, you can go through and have it rezoned, let's just throw this out here, like B2. And that guy has it for 2 years and he sells it to somebody else. He said, I'm not gonna put a convenience store there. I'm gonna put I don't know, gas station there or something. So you don't know what's gonna be there. You can approve something. Now, conditional use permit, it's a little bit different. Because you're approving the use and you can approve it with conditions. But the rezoning, you really can't put conditions on it.
so
So-
this format for the CUP, I think is great. So
Okay.
it sounds like for rezoning, we need something a lot more simple. What would you like to see? What would you suggest that would make it easy on staff, but also be something that as a planning commission, when we go to approve that, that we can have enough information to work off of?
I think if we have a site plan that shows surrounding zoning and uses. So we kind of know. If we have, and I'll just kind of, in another example, it's AC. But you have each side B2. And you have the back AC again. And he wants to go B2. Well, he's right there with the others that are B2, same use. It would, be natural for it to be a B2. Where if they were all AC and he wanted to zone it B2, spot zoning, that's a no-no. So I think if you have a plat and it shows the information of all the surrounding properties and the frontage and so forth, I think that's probably adequate for the rezoning portion. Because they're gonna have to come back later, they're gonna have to do a full site plan for the commercial site.
When you say it's spot zoning, but keep in mind, their comprehensive plan says that's where we want commercial.
I know, but then you've gotta look what's around it though. So you gotta kind of
Well,
take into
that-
account.
Yeah, future land use, what that map looks like as well.
We look at that each time we look at a public hearing case.
You mentioned they were farming the back of it. What happens when you put all the businesses out front? How does the farm access to all them businesses?
Well, I mean,
Well, it's a deep subject.
we don't landlock property, so that's something else we would have to look at. We're not gonna sign off on something that's gonna landlock an individual property. Does that work for the rezoning for y'all? Or do you wanna see something else?
I'm for what you were saying, what you were just saying.
Just a site
Yeah,
plan
we
with-
need, we
general
need to know, we need enough information to be able to understand the full scope of not just that parcel, but the surrounding, the future land use map, how it fits in with the comprehensive plan and so forth. Yeah, I think that is the main thing for the rezoning. And if we have something like this, for the CUP to be able to review that, I think that is really helpful.
I think the plan you outlined, and I agree with Mr. Sluter, that makes it attractive enough where people may want to do it. But it gives us a whole boatload of controls on the back end if we see something we don't like. Which is, I guess, ideal. We attract the people who want to rezone. And I made a point in one of our previous meetings that seemed to kind of make a light bulb come on for a few people. These parcels along 360, if you rezone them commercial, that takes them out of the residential spectrum. Because typically you do not downzone a piece of property. So if you, let's say the Simons tract, had that have been rezoned, if that had been zoned B2 and we had approved it, they would not be able to do what they're doing now. So strategically, and the three of us on the planning commission planning, if we had some parcels that were attractive because of location, but maybe we did not want to see hypothetically another apartment complex there, rezoning it B2 would prevent that. Where now it's in the comprehensive plan, and if someone came in and asked for that, we really have no grounds to deny it. So it's a strategic thing.
To that end.
Again, food for thought.
Yeah, to that end, and with the, what we're just discussing. If we do discuss rezoning parcels in this next phase, I think we need to add to that list of phase 2, any changes to the use matrix. That way we can put in items that, you know, that we don't want to see, ones that maybe we do want to see. That we can encourage, so.
And did y'all get a chance to look at the 34 things that were on this checklist for the CUP? Does that seem to cover everything that y'all think needs to be covered under the CUP?
You, from what I can tell, yes, you said you went through the ordinance. If we find that there's information that we would like to see, I think we can add to it.
Can add support. So if we're good with that, I will submit those changes for the 21st.
I've been holding a question the whole time. We've been talking about rezoning on Route 360. Do we have the right to change somebody else's tax-based ability of that property? If somebody's trying to be agriculture and you zone it business, that's a major, because I don't think you can have tax exempt agriculture in a business district, can you?
Well, this is actually something we have talked about before, and we have talked with the Commissioner of Revenue. And she did say, as long as she was a Commissioner of Revenue, if it was a residential use and we rezoned it business, she would keep it under the residential rate until such time it turned to business.
And the rezoning would be voluntary. It's not a blanket rezoning that they.
Right.
If you had a piece of property and the county said, Mr. Williams, this is an opportunity. If you'd like to rezone, we're going to make it a little easier for you. You could say, I have a piece of farmland. I want no parts of it. And then everybody would leave you alone. The sweeter side of this is what she just said. If you opt to rezone it to B2, it will keep its residential taxes until the point it is actually developed. And then the new owner / tenant would convert to commercial tax rate.
I believe that Hanover's had some of those instances up near the ABC distribution center on Cold Green Road. There's residential areas in there that had been rezoned business to encourage that. I don't know how their process was for it, but
And like we said, we do plan to bring the property owners in and get their input before we, move forward with anything on the property. They would be notified first and offered a chance to come to the meeting and speak on the subject, so.
well, our plan was that if they were a business use, they would be changed.
business.
Like some of them in there are still, are businesses and they're still residential. That's the opposite of what Mr. Williams is saying. And yeah, we can't as a board or planning commission force anybody to change it. Like Sherry was saying, that we're gonna ask voluntarily to begin with. And if they want to, they can. But the problem was we were running into before is we were gonna ask every parcel along the corridor to do that. And then Mr. Wagner was saying that's a little too much, too extensive right now. So let's just ask people just few certain select areas where we really do want some growth closer, maybe to Center Garage and Aylet, and then see if some of those property owners might, and like Sherry and all and her staff have looked into those pieces of properties that are nice to do that. So yeah, I see what you're, Mr. Otis. We can't force anybody. We can't just blanket, like you said, turn their property into commercial without any kind of things like that. So
But, we've talked about site ready, that makes that property a lot more appealing and a lot more valuable.
right.
How much time do you think that would shave off of somebody wanting to come in and develop a property if it was already zoned?
If I had to
appropriately?
guess, 6 months. Because you've got, the public hearings, but you've also got a surveyor out there that's gonna have to do, site work and submit site plan.
Yeah, I mean, that could be the difference between, somebody with a medium-sized business, 75 to 100 employees, wanting to build on 20 acres. Yeah,
And then not knowing if they're gonna get the approval or not, then having to wait 6 months. That makes a difference sometimes for a business.
Just an example to your point. The old Red Barn Furniture Store, not the one where they currently operate, but across the street. They just had a business move in there, Electroforce, with 98 employees. They skipped over us because of their interpretation of how we did business here. And King and Queen welcomed them with open arms and really helped facilitate getting them in there. Permits to renovate, permits to do all sorts of things. And it's just been a big, 98 employees is a pretty substantial.
Yeah.
It was so big that Delegate Hodges came down and acknowledged it, how big it was for his area. So, a lot of those folks actually live in King William County. But again, they could jump right across the river a half mile without TCO, without B-pole, and without, as Sherry just said, the 6 months of red tape that we go through right now in King William County.
All right, what else you got?
I think that's it. And we don't want to jump to phase 2 tonight. That's for another time. Unless there's something else you can think of, I will make these couple of changes and we'll get the packet, ready for, submission to the board, and y'all will receive the new packet with the new changes on it.
Wait for motion to adjourn.
Oh,
Mr. Greenwood, do you have anything else?
no, I'll second that.
Motion made to adjourn and properly seconded.
Mr. Kellum,
Aye.
Mr. Williams,
Uh,
Vice Chair Sluter,
Aye.
Chairman Greenwood.
Aye. See y'all.
have a nice weekend.
Okay, thanks. Yeah.
He's got his nice shirt on, shorts.
Yeah. My swimsuit.
Busted. What are you laughing at, Sherry? You were doing the same thing last week.
So where are you, Mr. Greenwood?
In the Outer Banks and Duck.
All right.